when we first started a few decades ago. It was very much compliance-driven security. So, and we talk about risk-based approaches to security. Are you seeing actually real, first-class best practice risk-based approaches to security? Is there something we need to do more of?
I think there are a lot of CISOs, a lot of security teams, a lot of really good security professionals trying really hard to take a risk-based approach. But actually, if I can make a join with what Steve was just saying just a moment ago, the risk equation is not an equation that the CISO, the security guy, can solve by themselves. The risk equation, actually, one way of looking at it is it's just a formalization of a dialogue between the security expert, yes, the business leader or the business owner, and the technologist or the people who enable the business through technology. So the security guy knows what can go wrong. Okay. He probably, if he's clever, if he's done his job, he knows he's gathered threat intelligence. He knows who's trying to get after the business. But the business guy only knows what the value is the only guy who knows what the value is in that business.
Okay.
And without the value in the equation, the whole thing is an academic exercise, and it does break down into this just pursuit of controls ticking. And of course, you need the technologist because there's, he has his own dialogue with the business about, well, what does the business want to do? What can technology enable the business to do better? And obviously, what comes along with the technology is the determination of the specific types of vulnerability that might then be exploited. So you need that dialogue, and you need those three parties to contribute to this equation. And actually, it's that bit that's really, really hard. It's that bit that we still haven't got right. And, you can say that the business value bit needs to come from the top of the business. That's quite right. And the top of the business really doesn't yet get it.
Right.
I mean, if I have to say to another board non-executive member, no, you can't get the board pack on your own private email address. I'd like to sort of end it all. Because it's just a demonstration that actually both sides have failed. They're not listening, and we as security professionals aren't making it accessible enough to them that really, that could be the root of the ransomware attack, that he's using his own private email address.
Fine.
So, I mean, I think a great example of that, and the way risk is changing too, because the criminals, when they get blocked off in one place, don't just give up, they look for softer ways in, is the third-party supply chain risk. So big companies, the kind that, John has advised in the past, are really well defended now. They spend a lot of money, they've employed the right people, they've bought the right technology. They've realized in recent years that they're connected to maybe 10,000 vendors. Each of which presents some risk to them, either direct, an IT risk, if you like, or because if they fall over themselves, production in the client may just fall over itself. So that ecosystem risk is, I know, occupying the minds of lots of CISOs. And it's really hard to get your head around and to work out who is a threat to you and what you can do about it. So the risk is unfortunately escalating. And as we harden one bit, it goes somewhere else.
And on that point with suppliers, Steve, I mean, it's that classic situation where you can outsource a service, but you can't outsource a risk. You still own the risk. So, and again, in your experience and conversations we've had, there seems to be almost a different mentality and approach for suppliers, which is largely fill out a checklist that either does or doesn't get filled out. What gets filled out is not really information that gives you a good idea of risk. What can we do about this? Because it seems as though there's this rapid acceleration of pushing these services out now to suppliers.
Yeah, there is, and it'll continue, Nick. And I think that one of the things that we saw during the pandemic was very much more of a reliance on the tick box compliance. And we can understand why, because you can't actually physically go and audit some of these environments, of course, which you would do for your tier 1 and possibly tier 2 suppliers in some instances. And for me, it's about collaboration. It's about working very much more closely together. I think it's not the only answer, but I think one of the shortfalls is that all too often what we're doing is telling suppliers to do something without explaining the context and why. Why is it important to do that?
Okay.
And what is the impact of it? And I think that from a large company perspective as well, there's a lot more sharing that can go on. In terms of some of the tools that can be used, some of the ways in which security can be enabled across a smaller organization. So it's about collaboration, it's about transparency. But if you're looking at it from a supplier standpoint, there's a very great fear that if you don't tick the right box, you're going to lose that contract.
Yeah.
And we should be using that in a positive way.
Yes.
Rather than in a punitive way. So I think there's a maturing again of the way in which we use our third parties, because they yes, represent a risk, but also they can really give a very strong foundation to protecting the assets that we consider to be the most important.
Yes.
So I think, again, a lot more collaboration, transparency, education in that particular space. And the final thing I would say, and you know this very well, I'm not a huge fan of compliance.
Yeah.
Good compliance does not equal good security.
Yeah.
And I think the quicker we can move away from this, I'm compliant, so therefore everything's good, to a much more realistic understanding of the problem, of which compliance plays a part.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
But it isn't the only answer. I think that the sooner we can do that, the better.